I briefly want to talk about the three most common flaws. The three most common flaws on the LSAT are confusing necessary and sufficient conditions. That's flaw number 1. Flaw number 2 is confusing correlation for causation. And flaw number 3 is confusing the part for the whole or the whole for the part. Okay? Now, there's a whole bunch of other flaws. Some companies have listed out 80. Even that list is not exhaustive. The way the LSAT tries to make this challenging for people who are scoring in the 170s is to come up with new flaws. But what's most important is that you recognize those three because they are definitely going to be on your test, guaranteed. Right? So confusing the necessary condition for the sufficient condition basically looks like this. If I'm let's see. If I get run over by a car, then I will be angry. Fair enough? Okay. I'm angry. Therefore, I must have been run over by a car. Is everyone cool with the fact that this argument is flawed, right? Invalid. First of all, just intuitively, why is this invalid?
Something else could have made you angry.
Something else could have made me angry, right? Like, even if this is true, even if it's true that cars running over me makes me angry, the fact that I'm angry now could be for a whole host of reasons, right? Like the strawberry water dispenser was just not fast enough. You guys tried the strawberry water? It's pretty good. Anyways, therefore, the fact concluding that I must have been run over by a car is just going too far. It certainly could be true, but it doesn't have to be true. Now, here's the question that I want to know. I think we all recognize this is flawed. But why does the LSAT consider this confusing necessary conditions for sufficient conditions? Why do they describe it in that way? Can anyone pinpoint here what is going on in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions? Yeah.
You're confusing the angry being, which is the necessary condition.
Yes.
And you're taking it as a condition that would be like the car, like that would be sufficient for saying.
Yeah.
Confusing sufficient for necessary.
I'm confusing sufficient for necessary. Imagine this is me, right? This is me, and I made this argument. What I'm thinking right now, when I say, oh, I'm angry, therefore I must have been run over by a car, what am I thinking in my head? What's the if-then statement that I have in my mind?
If A, then C.
If A, then C, right? This is what I am thinking. This is what I said, but this is what I'm thinking. So the then clause is called the necessary condition. The if clause is called the sufficient condition, right? So what did I do? I treated a necessary condition as if it were a sufficient condition. So when you see this false contrapositive or this mistake, this reversal, right? You go into the answers and you look for an answer that describes confusing necessary for sufficient. If you see this flaw, the correct answer will almost certainly talk about confusing necessary for sufficient. If you don't see this flaw, one of the wrong answers will almost certainly talk about confusing necessary for sufficient. In flaw questions, have you kept that one answer open that talked about the argument confuses a necessary condition for going to the store with a sufficient condition for the same? And you're like, maybe that happened, right? Like, it's so wordy and confusing, you're kind of like, maybe. And so you keep it open. But if you don't have this flaw going on, then that answer choice is definitely wrong. Okay? Yeah?
Are these kinds of confusions from sufficient to necessary going to be some kind of form of if-then, or a complex form of if-then?
Yeah, they can either be an if-then statement or a hidden if-then statement, which would be like all. If you say like all apples are red, you're essentially saying if you're an apple, then you're red. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes?
What makes A necessary?
Just the fact that it's in the then clause. So it's just something you can remember.
Okay.
Then clauses in if-then statements are necessary conditions. That's what they're called.
So you're just confusing something that's, so you can just kind of, if there's an if-then clause.
And it's flipped.
And it's flipped, then you are then
you're treating a necessary condition, which is in fact a necessary condition, as if it were a sufficient condition.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, that's flaw number 1. Flaw number 2 is confusing correlation with causation, right? So here's my quick quiz for you. I'm going to say a sentence. You tell me whether it's a correlative sentence or a causal sentence. Okay? People who buy 2 pairs of running shoes tend to run more than those who do not. Okay? Yeah, that's correlation. They what words make it that they correlation? Okay. Buying 2 pairs of shoes tends to increase how much you run. That's causation, even though I said tends to, right? So tends to actually doesn't matter. What matters is, is the verb saying that one thing is having an effect on the other, or is it just saying that these things coexist? So when I say people who buy 2 pairs of shoes tend to run, the verb there is run. They tend to run more than other people. Why? I have no idea. Is it because they buy those shoes or some other reason, right? But if I say buying 2 pairs of shoes tends to increase how much you run, the verb is now increase, not run, right? And increase is a causal verb. It says this thing is having an effect on another. Okay, so the point is that if you see a correlative claim in the evidence, and then the conclusion says, well, therefore one is causing the other, that's certainly possible, but for all we know, maybe the causation is reversed, or maybe something else is causing both. So that's flaw number 2. Any questions on that one? Okay, yes?
So if there is like a kind of causation correlation and it's a flaw argument, should we bet that, the flaw is probably a mix of correlation?
Well, that's a flaw that they really hate, so it's probably going to be, that's the one that they describe. But you have to make sure that the correlation is in the premises and the causation is in the conclusion.
Okay.
Because if you have causation in the premises and then the conclusion is causal as well, then there's a different flaw going on, right? If you have causation in the premises and then correlation in the conclusion, again, probably a different flaw. Because if something does cause something else, then there's probably a correlation. It's just that going in the other way is a challenge. Things that are correlated are not necessarily caused, but things that are caused probably do have a correlation. Yeah.
Could you explain what makes your causal statement that you just said a causal statement?
The word increase. So it suggests that one thing is affecting in another.
One thing is what against?
Affecting another. So, for example, if I said to you that drinking milk makes me sad, is that causal or correlated?
Drinking milk makes you sad. That would be causal.
Yeah, because of what word?
Makes.
Makes. It's all about the verb. The verb, is it telling you that this thing is having an effect on another thing, or is it just saying that they happen together? So, for example, people who smoke are more likely to get cancer. What's the verb? Are. People who smoke are more likely to get cancer. Okay, why? We don't know. But if I say smoking increases cancer, or your chances of getting cancer, then that's causal. And notice, causation does not have to be perfect. Like you could say, smoking increases your chances of getting cancer by 5%. You had a 20% chance of getting cancer, now you have a 25% chance of getting cancer. It's still causal.
So the causal statements are just more of a matter of fact.
They're both facts. The issue is one claiming that 2 things happen together, or is one claiming that the thing actually causes the other thing? So in areas where we have lead poisoning, we have more birth defects.
Correlation.
How many people say correlation? How many people say causation? Okay, good. Yeah, it's correlation. All we know is we have more birth defects where we have more lead poisoning. Okay. Is the lead poisoning causing the birth defects? Most likely. But do we know that? We don't know. Okay. That's flaw number 2. Flaw number 3 is part to whole. Just a quick example of this. If I say that every person in this room is really nice, therefore this class as a whole is nice. It's not necessarily true. As a group, we might be mean. So the point is what's true of the parts may not necessarily be true of the whole, and vice versa, right? Or maybe it's more obvious if I say, hey, this class is nice, therefore everyone in this class is nice. Not so much. Not necessarily, at least. It's not that these things can't be true, it's that they're not necessarily true. Those are the three most common flaws. Any questions about any of that? All right, let's go into the example. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just on the causal and correlated one, the flaw isn't correlating something. The flaw is when in the argument, the conclusion is taking a correlation and creating a causation.
Yes, the problem takes place as soon as the person concludes from the correlation that these two things have a causal relationship, right? Like if I said people who smoke are more likely to get lung cancer, right? Our brains want to say, I know what's going on. The smoking's causing the lung cancer. And so then the author does that on the LSAT. They say, therefore, these studies show that smoking causes lung cancer or something, right? Well, although that could be true, that's not the standard on the LSAT. The standard isn't, is your conclusion something that could be true? Is it something that must be true? And so, since correlation does not prove causation, it just supports it or suggests it, when they say, therefore, smoking causes cancer, we're saying, yeah, maybe you're right, but not necessarily. For all we know, cancer induces smoking. People get cancer like, well, I'm going to die anyway, so might as well start smoking. Or I'm stressed out, let's pick up the cigarette. Or maybe the people's genes who are predispose them to cancer also predispose them to smoking. So smoking and cancer have no relationship to each other, but the genes that those people carry cause both. So something else could be causing both, and that's why they're correlated. So jumping to the conclusion that smoking causes cancer is certainly a possibility, but it's not necessarily true, and that's what we're trying to say. Yeah. Cool. So that's why we're concerned about those only when the correlation is in the premises and the causation is in the conclusion. So when you read a causal conclusion, you want to put on the brakes and say, wait a sec, did I miss correlation in the evidence? Or was the evidence causal? Because if the evidence was already causal, then they're going from causation to causation, which is not a problem. So then the flaw must be something else. Alrighty.